Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and martech. I'm Henry Powderly, VP of Content at eMarketer. Today, we'll dive into the findings and emerging trends from Digitalzone's new global survey on the current state of demand generation and the B2B marketing landscape. I'm joined now by my special guests, Drew Flowerday, Director of Demand Generation at Digitalzone, Sophia Agustina, Global Brand to Demand Strategy at Cross IBM, and Kyle Davis, Director of Marketing and Communications at Studio Science. Drew, Sophia, and Kyle have a great presentation for you, and afterwards we'll open it up for questions about what you've learned. So please use that chat window to submit your questions for the Q&A. With all that said, Drew, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. So today, like Henry mentioned, we want to go over the 2024 State of Demand Gen. Really, we wanted to take a look back at 2023, analyze sort of what was happening in the market, and use that to sort of fuel a survey around what's going on with demand gen marketing in 2024. So we think 2023 was a bumpy year for tech. I'm sure most people here can kind of agree. Lots of things across the board, right? Generative AI hitting the mix in sort of a very significant way, or AI in general feeling like kind of a thematic presence over the year. But a lot more happened, right? We had a lot of big tech, layoffs seem to happen across the board. We had, Netflix password change, a lot of things that really led for sort of a calamitous year for all of us. Some things good and exciting and making us very happy about what the future holds. Others maybe less so. So when we took a look at the year of 2023, right, we wanted to get a sense for what do we think 2024 has in store, specifically with an emphasis on B2B and the trends kind of in the B2B space. So we surveyed marketers from around the world, right, across kind of business sizes, across title levels. We tried to get a sense for, we got around 1,500 participants. What are the kinds of things that are impacting us in the B2B space, specifically sort of with a marketing flavor and even more with a demand gen sort of spin? So wanted to ask these people that grouping of questions. And what we found was we came out with 4 key insights, right? We had 4 major groupings of what are the things that feel really hyper relevant to marketers, to people in the B2B space this year. One was connecting the brand side of the efforts and the demand or the demand gen side of the efforts, right? Making sure that your approach to marketing has sort of a cohesion between those two sort of focus areas. Reducing uncertainty with data, right? Using data to, instead of just leaning on guesswork, leaning on maybe even experience, try to lean into data to make decisions that are going to drive business for your company. Increasing the value of vendors. So making sure that if you are going to a vendor specifically, for example, for a demand generative function, making sure that whatever you're willing to pay for the vendors that you have, making sure that they provide you with the highest kind of yield that you would want to expect. I feel like that one is specifically targeted around sort of the back of the recession commentary, a lot of budgets feeling squeezed or at least interrogated a lot more carefully. And then finally, on a similar note, ROI being multidimensional, right? ROI is not just maybe we get leads, those leads turn into business, that's marketing, but is instead a much more complex sort of analysis for us marketers to be doing. And certainly we are moving a lot of levers to make sure that we're maximizing return on investment. So those are the sort of 4 key takeaways. What I'd like to do now is meet with my co-hosts today, Kyle and Sophia, as they represent their businesses and functional areas in marketing, and talk to them a little bit about some of the stats that we found in their reactions. So we'd like this to be sort of an open, casual, fireside-ish type of conversation where we just look at the questions and see how it's impacted them. And we'd love to open the floor to questions like Henry alluded to. If you have any questions or comments along the way around your experience with any specific topics, we'd love to hear it. So first and foremost, connecting brand and demand. A resounding 99% of marketers, maybe unsurprisingly, say that their brand strategy is influential to their demand gen strategy. So the first question that I had is, and I'll kick this one over to Kyle to start with, how would you delineate brand versus demand in your organization?
Yeah, so they have to live together. They have to be one and the same. And if you delineate them, your brand is your identity, which I think everyone knows, but I think it's especially important when you're talking about demand gen because it's not just when the content you're putting out there, you have to have something that makes you stand out. Why you over every other company out there? And if there are a lot of B2B companies out there say you could say there's a ton of well, I work in professional services. There's a ton of companies that provide the same types of services. Like, what makes you different? And the other part of it is that brand is trust. Like, people are still B2B buyers are still B2C buyers at heart. And I harp on that a lot. That for every B2B deal you make in your business world, you're making 20 B2C transactions or engagements or whatever it may be. And people buy with their emotions and they buy with who they feel connected with and the brands they feel connected with. And that's why employee advocacy is such a big thing, because you resonate with people that you know and you trust, and you're more likely to trust them. And so I think the brand part of that is key for the demand generation. To answer the question fully, demand gen is the kind of activation of that brand into the market and kind of showing why you're different and the different tactics to activate it. But for us, it almost has to be one and the same. We went through an acquisition about a year ago, and if you that's something everyone has to be on the same page with. If you don't have a brand that everyone's aligned with, your messaging is going to be all over the place. Good luck. Maybe you get people in the door and then the experience is completely different than what you sold. Like, that's part of it too. You kind of have to pay the piper there. And so I think that the really identifying and understanding who you are as a company is huge to be able to do the demand gen well. I want to get Sophia's thoughts on this, but I worked at a place previously that was a smaller shop, and all of their kind of thought leadership was basically sharing other people's ideas. They would share links to forums on social, and they would do all this stuff. And I'd be like, why are we not talking about ourselves this way? And we got there and they're like, well, we're small. We don't have anything to say. We're not, X blank global company. It's like, no, actually, you know what? We actually have quite a bit to say. And it was telling that the fact that there wasn't a true kind of brand identity there of like who we are and what makes us different and what our value propositions are, because everything you do from a demand generation side has to ladder up to your value propositions. And it's very clear that when you have that, like, there is nowhere to go from a demand generation side. So it's one of those things that's almost kind of this like invisible aura that just has to be present everywhere and everyone's going to buy into, kind of similar to customer service on like the B2C side. Otherwise, your demand gen is probably going to be all over the place and not nearly as successful as you want it to be.
Yeah, 100%, Kyle. I agree that we need to connect the dots between brand to demand, especially around messaging. So as Kyle mentioned, right, whatever your company's brand identity should marry with the demand gen initiatives that you're doing. So at IBM is a really big company, so sometimes it's hard to connect the dots between brand to demand, but we try to connect the dots either by campaign themes or by events. So from how we deliver the brand activation from the awareness perspective, it should marry what we are doing in terms of generating that consideration and demand for who we are trying to reach within our target audience, right? So at IBM, for example, I mean, I'll share another company too that I worked previously, very smaller, but for a big company like IBM, we have multiple campaigns. And so for each of our campaign themes, we identify who the buying groups are. The members of the buying group for each of the solutions. So like Kyle mentioned, it's all about B2B, B2C, right? In today's world, because like who you are talking to is not just the account. The account has a pain point, but ultimately it's the buyer that you are, connecting. Whether within the buying groups you have the user or the influencer or the champion, Serious Decision or Forrester has a whole study on that. But make sure that you are resonating with that person, that and identify with their pain points, whether it's wherever they are in the buying stage, right? Whether it's from brand, which is the awareness side, you have about, I don't know, a few touches, I guess, to get them to want to interact with you and engage with you, have that reason to want to engage more deeply into your case studies or your white paper or your 1.5 hours videos or maybe just 30 minutes video like today. But creating that a holistic view around brand to demand, especially on the messaging, is key. I'll share just a little bit of how it's actually played into fruition really, really well at a medium-sized company, where you could actually personalize the experience from, the brand side. So, brand could be social, advertising, or paid media, or, programmatic, what have you, on trying to get that buying signal and client signal. And then you go through the whole personalization into, your first party data, right? Like, whether it's your website or your videos, and then your webinar. It's all integrated with one cohesive methodology. And then typically we use personalization for that. I don't know if that's answer your question, Drew, between the both of us.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think it actually, thank you, because I think you've teed us up nicely for the next part of this conversation, especially in the conversation around personalization specifically. Feels like, how do we support functions like personalization as a marketing org all starts with data, right? So when you're personalizing, you want to be saying, like, I know this person's first name. It's probably the most rudimentary form of personalization, all the way down to, can I anticipate what they're thinking or what they're feeling or what I think they'll want next. So yeah, I think that it all kind of lines up together. And so our next question around reducing, or our next, I guess, major data point that we wanted to identify around reducing uncertainty was that 39% of marketers, a large percentage, but maybe not, the 99% that we saw on the last slide, 39% of marketers are expressing concerns about a lack of buyer journey insights. So I think that, to me, that's personally a very interesting stat, specifically as somebody who works in Excel kind of all the time, crunching our client data or our prospect data, but specifically getting some insights, like the verbiage of getting insights around what is the buyer journey like, right? How do we take them from no concept of what our brand is at all, really, into buyers and loyalists and people who have retained with our business. So with all of that said, right, how are the two of you, and Sophia, I'll kick it off to you first, how are the two of you using kind of data about your buyers or their buyer journey in your demand gen strategies?
Yeah, isn't it interesting? We're still using Excel manually, even though we have so many MarTech now. But I still love Excel. So I think, I think I mentioned earlier about first party data, right? Understanding your buyer's behavior within your domain, where, especially now it's a very complex sales cycle. And, I think the stats saying that about 70%, of the buyers tend to search about you first, about what they're looking for before they actually engage with you. So understanding the digital behavior of your buyers is really key on first party data. But also, I think, we've used this for many, many years now, but understanding the intent from the accounts, as well as, understanding what solutions they're looking for is really key. So that way, as I mentioned earlier, connecting the brand to demand is so important in a campaign. The way that I've done it, that is, it's still a learning progress, but that have worked is using intent-based platform, for example, that identifies, the intent of those accounts, and then mapping it out by, high, medium, low. And then, as we all know, 5% of the market is in buying mode. So, really, really honing in on those high intent accounts that you want to, engage and penetrate, and nurturing the rest is really key so that you can prioritize that. But understanding first party data is key, third party data. And then also, I think it'll be really, really cool if, like Kyle mentioned earlier too, if you understand the person interests, as well as, what is resonating with them when you're trying to connect the dots between brand to demand and understanding these buyers' insights.
Yeah, because I think we're getting to the point where, like, the first name in an email, company name, personalization's not doing it anymore. Like, like, I don't know how you guys feel when I get hit up on my email a bunch. Just using my name, like, doesn't really do it for me. So you have to keep going further. And I think part of that is, you're right. There's different ways to do it in the interests, and kind of, again, tugging on that emotional level. Again, location doesn't matter as much as using that, but it was actually interesting. I got an email recently where they're like, hey, we saw you were in this location. I absolutely love blank restaurant, and which I also love. I don't know if they found me on social and maybe I had tagged it. Maybe they just got lucky. I don't know, but like, they're at least, it's taking it a step further. And so I think the interesting thing there, yeah, with personalization specifically, you got to have something other than just first name, company name, whatnot. And really trying to, and that's where some of the technology is getting interesting, because now there's kind of AI bots and other things that are tracking where people are going on your site, and then basically they can, quantify where they're at in the cycle of their buyer cycle, and then they hit them with a certain piece of content based on whether they think they're just kind of right off the bat kind of trying to get awareness, or they're in the consideration stage, whatever it may be. But yeah, so I think the personalization part's interesting. I would also say, how often have you actually asked people what they want? And I think there's a couple ways you can do it. One, I think brands need to get creative with how they can get some of that either intent or demographic data without straight up asking for it. It's the same thing that B2C companies have been doing forever. And I think B2B can take a little bit of that. Like, for instance, I can't remember the airline, but there was an airline that had kind of a social poll, and it's like, hey, we gave you 2 free tickets to anywhere around the world, what are you doing? And it was like, going to wherever by myself, or like family trip to Disney World, or beach vacation with my fiance. By answering that, they just think they're like answering a question and sharing it. The company is like, all right, I know now you are married with kids and you are looking for this type of thing. Like, it's not a one-to-one example, but I think B2B can get a little bit more creative with like, what are your pain points? What are you coming with? Especially maybe companies like in professional services or more complex areas that sell a lot of different things, trying to get creative with how you're asking your prospects what they're needing or what their challenges are, and doing it in a way that doesn't feel invasive or kind of prodding, like you're about to be a used car salesman, just like pitching them, I think is really important. And then afterward, like, how many times do people actually go back and ask either prospects who maybe made it to the pitch and it didn't work out, or they left, or they ended up being your clients? Like, how often do you ask your current clients or your customers, like, why us? What was it that resonated? Where did you initially find us? What, all this stuff? Like, it's so hard to track, and most people won't think to immediately kind of attribute you unless you ask. And I think that's a big part of it too, is just not only the mass of people coming to your website every single day, but like, do you even understand why your current customers picked you? And I think there's a lot of insights you can get from that, and especially the ones who didn't. Like, maybe it had something that was not in your control at all. Maybe they had a bad experience somewhere along the way that you are completely ignorant to. But I think you got to kind of have to be that investigative reporter a little bit as a B2B marketer, and go out there and ask the questions and try to figure out and glean some of those insights yourself.
Yeah, something that it's a good shout, and maybe especially because I think, you mentioned the airline and social media, right? As that being the point. I think in my personal professional experience, choosing the medium to like start to have that conversation, I feel like is just as important as understanding how to incorporate that like feedback or that context into how do we make change as a marketing department. So for example, our VP of marketing, her name is Ebony, she's lovely, loves going to client dinners during events, and she will just ask all the time, like, oh my gosh, tell me what you like, tell me what you hate. We'll just like, and not even, I think she uses the opportunity that she's not a seller trying to make a sale in that moment, but instead being a marketer, saying, hi, I'm a marketer, you're a marketer, tell me how you feel about these things. Like, I'm genuinely curious to get that. And she'll take that data back to the team and say, I've learned that, oh my gosh, this thing that we have been assuming all along, we assumed that they don't care as much about the price point, and maybe they actually do, or they don't care as much about, like certain elements that she brings back to the team that really change the way that we message, just by that simple dinner conversation of being excited to actually learn. So yeah, good context there.
It also seems like you need to, part of it too, the tricky thing is that your perspective is not going to be necessarily lined up to the prospect or customer's perspective. Like there's, especially if you sell, again, I'm going back to kind of the complex companies among us that sell multiple different things. There's plenty of times where you might have a customer that's been with you for 6 or 7 years, but they only know you for one kind of narrow thing, and they have no idea that you do X, Y, and Z. And so that's, I guess, the other side of the coin a little bit to be kind of cognizant of, is that yes, you could just only feed them content about X. Maybe you're an email service provider and you've been helping them out for 10 years and they know you as their email partner and whatever. They have no idea you also do CRM or you also do whatever else. And so when you get them kind of stuck into the persona and understand kind of where they are and what they've done before, it can be very easy to just say, oh, they only care about email. That's all they bought from us. Well, do they even know? Like, you got to be able to, and that's where it goes back to the brand too, is you got to tell the story in different ways that doesn't completely make it seem like it's out of left field and not relevant, because relevancy is key over everything. So you still have to kind of get creative there. But there is that part where you have to be careful not to silo people as you try to bucket your personas and really kind of understand them further.
Yeah, we could probably have like a whole day series on this specific conversation.
Let's do it, Drew.
Okay.
Series.
Yeah.
Personalization series.
Part 2. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
But kind of moving into more parts of the conversation around reducing uncertainty felt like, the advent of newness, right? Like what is new in the world as marketers? And I think AI, like I said, AI felt like it kind of topped the charts in 2023, and that doesn't really feel like it's going away in any respect. We could talk about generative AI, certainly, but we could also definitely talk about AI as it's been incorporated for a while now, which is an insight-driven activity, automations, and whatnot. But 9 in 10 marketers are saying that they absolutely are using it to create personalized content. So again, kind of on that same subject. So I wanted to ask the two of you, with so many marketers kind of incorporating AI into their workflows, and Sophia, I'll start with you. Like, what's been your experience with AI and what you've been doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think we've been using AI for decades now. But it's just behind the scene, right? Until recently, AI is on the forefront. So, when we even identify company lookalikes, for example, right? I use that quite a bit, identifying which companies have high propensity to buy. Behind the scene, I'm sure the vendors I work with has a lot of AI capabilities that help identify that. And typically that helps to improve conversion, by 30%, when you really look into like we mentioned earlier, the account intent, the account insights, and that level of buyer intent data of whether they're more likely to purchase or not. The other AI that, I'm sure we all have used it, but again, to your point, Drew, it's just, we are just not aware of it, is all the automations that we do in terms of personalizing the experience, whether it's by persona, by industry, by, what have you. It's all behind the scene. You have all those like big data, automation and AI. But I think what would be cool, which I think, again, as Kyle mentioned, I think we need to be very careful in terms of how we use the person's data, private, in terms of privacy and trust around AI. But I think what would be cool is that if you could marry basically the person's interests, whether let's just say within the buying groups, Drew, Kyle, and I are different members of the buying group, and then if there's I think there's some technologies out there that can marry the person interests, such as whether they're interested in sports or music, or what are some of their favorite stores and all those demographics data around the person. And then you have the the account insights, the firmographics of that company. Then you could tailor, I think you could use AI to make it more efficient. You could tailor the copy as well as the content to be more relevant to that person. So for example, I think I mentioned this if you're in the last video, my favorite color is orange. And I do love to try new restaurants. Let's just say, for example, if a company, and I'm more of a impromptu kind of communicators, and if a company communicate to me in my communication style, as well as the whole campaign is orange, versus like if they communicated to Drew in a authoritative style, which is his style, as you can tell, and his favorite color is blue, and all his campaign track is blue, then it resonates more, right, with me, and it's the person is more likely to want to engage with you, and it will be a higher conversation. So I think I didn't even think that this webinar is going to go into B2B, B2C, but I think that is so key today to set yourself apart in terms of personalizing the experience for your customer, like really go into the person.
Yeah, and AI is one of those things where it's a slippery slope, right? Especially from the content side. And I think as someone with a content background and a writer, marketing writer, like I have to shun it to a certain extent. But it's one of those things just to remind you, like it's a tool in the toolbox. It doesn't replace the toolbox. I think similarly, it's fascinating both ways. So like what Sophia said is 100% correct. A lot of the automations on the back end are going to make your life much easier, and it's already been working in ways that you're maybe not realizing, but it allows you to not have to hire 2 new people and instead can do certain else. But it also doesn't replace your physical human marketers by any means. And I think that's where, especially when we get into chat GPT and some of that kind of stuff, like it's great for certain aspects of it, and kind of maybe broadening new perspectives or bouncing ideas or generating ideas and brainstorming, that sort of thing. But it also, it can get creepy fast, as we know. And also it just, it's also not 100% correct. You're talking about when you put something into chat GPT, it's going to give you a generalized, all-encompassing answer, right? We just got done talking about how your brand has to be a very specific why you kind of POV. So you can't just be spouting out the complete general amalgamation answers from there and expect to get it. But AI, in terms of being able to make their lives easier, absolutely. Not only make your lives easier as a marketing team, but like I think of chatbots, again, for certain like B2B companies that can answer the very simple questions, or maybe the more frequently asked questions, and provide a link to an answer somewhere on the site so that your sales team or customer service teams or whatever don't have to do it. Like save, do all of the repetitive, easy baseline stuff, leave that to the AI, and let your teams handle the more complex things. And especially if someone doesn't know how to navigate your site and trying to find something about a product or whatever it may be, and they can talk to a bot in a window that pops up real quick, and they can spout them to the right page or give them a PDF or whatever it is, and they're problem solved in 2 seconds. And that's great. That's a great use of AI. It's just when you're trying to build whole campaigns and replace maybe what you're doing currently with variations of AI and ChatGPT and whatnot, that's where maybe it can, if you're not paying attention to it, it could get dangerous. And I know, Drew, you have a great analogy on that. I'm not going to steal your analogy, because that would be like ChatGPT stealing other things and giving it to us. So you can say that, but yeah, it's you just have to have some oversight on it.
AI is kind of like an intern a little bit. No, not throwing shade or whatever on interns at all. But usually when you're working with an intern, you feel like you can give them a task. They can come back with the results of that task. And I would say, maybe 9 in 10 times when it comes back, you have to edit it in some, semi-significant way to fit it into what you want. So it's a good starting point. But yeah, maybe not the expert that I think a lot of people thought it might have been at the beginning. Okay, we are running up against time here, so I'm going to ask both of you all, that we can just fire through these last points and then sort of get to a Q&A. So the value of vendors was sort of the the third takeaway, which was increasing the value of vendors is going to be kind of a key thing that marketers are keeping in mind in 2024, certainly going to be a major focus. And so these questions represent what were some of the like most challenging or where did you find some significant issues with vendors this past year? And 54% said that it had something to do with data quality. Another 76% said it had something to do with either communication and customer service. And so I'll start with you, Sophia. I wanted to open it up to either of those data points. How do you feel like that resonates with your experience? And what's your perspective on either the data quality piece or maybe the communication piece?
Yeah, so definitely data quality is top of mind for a lot of marketers. And I was actually lucky to have met Integrate a few years ago, and they helped me to improve data quality. There's no, basically identify which, how you'd like to quantify your leads, and they can dedupe some of the leads that you're getting, and then, improve, at least at the time, it helped me improve about 40% of the incoming leads, and then the conversion rate improved by 3%, 4 percentage points. So that was really great in terms of data quality. So now, most of my campaigns, I try to get quality traffic or quality leads. And then for customer service, I'm sorry for the 76% who experienced that unresponsiveness from your vendors. Shame on them. I have not had any experience my vendors being unresponsive. So hopefully, if some of you other vendors here do not do that to people. But I think it's important to set goals with your vendors, and then making sure that you both are coming from the same. Identify what the objectives are for whatever program that you're working on. If it's, ultimately your vendors are an extension of your team, right? So, have one-on-ones maybe on every 2 weeks. But I don't know, maybe I'm a strict, I'm very strict with my vendors maybe, but I have not had that experience at all.
I'm good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay. Kyle, did you want to add anything, or you want to?
I mean, I think the only thing I would say is I wonder how much of the communication issues and also the data quality is just it's a lack of understanding, especially if I keep going back to, and this is an exercise I keep having to do, because you are in your business every single day. It's, it better than anyone else. And it's hard to think, like a lot of times when you're working with the vendor, not only are they working with you, but they're working with 50 other companies, and they do not know your business like you do. It's hard for them to go out and exactly find the right, especially if you're kind of brand messaging's all over the place, it's hard for them to go out and find the right people like you do. And I think some advice is almost like from The Office, like Michael Scott, like explain it to me like I'm 5. Like, I think some of it is like, you have to really start with like, okay, what are we trying to achieve here? Here's what we do. Now let's get more and more, build on it from a complexity standpoint. But I think a lot of it is, I think we, as the company who use the vendors, have very little patience for them not understanding it, because we're in it every day. We're like, why do you not get this very expansive thing that we do and understand all of our services right away? For them, it's it's one of those things where I think there's a kind of a divide there, and whatever you can do to help bridge that divide and use communication to come down to their level and bring them back up with you, or arm them with certain things. I think that I would imagine, and at least we've experienced it before, like that seems to be the root of a lot of struggles.
So you're saying that I'm a great client, not that I'm strict to my vendors, because I can communicate well.
Exactly.
Right, Kyle?
Okay. All right. I will lightning round us because I'm watching the clock here. Measuring ROI, right? That to me felt like one of the more significant topics, or at least resonates with me personally as a demand gen marketer. It seems like emphasizing ROI this year is huge. So we asked across the board, what strategies, and this was sort of a multi-select option. What are you using to actually increase or optimize your ROI. So wanted to feed that over to the two of you. Does this chart kind of resonate? Is there anything here that you particularly agree with or don't agree with? Kyle, I can start with you since I started with Sophia last time.
It seems like, I mean, you increase and decrease are both in the top four. I think that says a lot. But, it's all about being in the right places. It's not being everywhere and just adding to it. There's plenty of places where it doesn't make sense to be in terms of certain channels for certain audiences and that sort of thing. So yeah, I imagine that if you're probably doing it right, your optimization strategy probably includes most of these things, right? There's probably certain areas where you're amping up, you're decreasing others, you're increasing spend on here, you're taking out of others because it doesn't work, and that's part of the ROI. It has to be part of it, in the optimization with it is just constantly monitoring what's working, what's not, and then pivoting on a dime when you need to. And so I don't think there's not like there's one. That's I guess the fun part of marketing, and also the challenge is there's not one right answer. It completely it's all depending on you and where you're at and what you're doing. And so like all of these strategies are valid in certain situations. And part of it is knowing that you don't have to be everywhere and you don't have to cut everything. It's what's the right channels to be in, where's the right places to spend. And you got to have the data and you got to keep looking at it all the time, because what might be the right answer in February, on February 20th, might be the wrong answer on August 21st based on what's happening. And so that's part of it too, is just understanding that if you want a solid ROI, your strategy is basically going to be ever evolving.
You said it all, Kyle. So I would say, prioritize based on what's working, and then also have the courage to deselect. I think as marketers, we like to test a lot of things. We like to, be everywhere, like Kyle mentioned, but really, really understanding where your clients are, your buyers are, and go after that channel. But also, like we talked about earlier, the buyer's insight is really, really key. So really be a data-driven organization where you focus on the customer. Really understanding your customer is really, really key, I would say. And all this resonate with me, Drew. All the pain points here.
Yeah, same here. Feels like I'm following each of those. All right, so the big question, if 2023 was the year of AI, I'll pose it to both of you. What do you think 2024 is going to be? And then we'll feed it over to questions from the audience.
I think, Kyle, you touched a little bit on it, which is optimization, whether it's, your budget or your campaigns, also maybe how you implement AI. So really understanding what really matters for you in 2024, and what would you like to see happen, right? Like what's the outcome of your tactics or your strategy? Like really understanding that is really key. Outcome-based marketing. I heard from CEO of ITSMA. I don't know if you guys use the framework ITSMA. She talked in one of her reports saying that what gets measured gets done. So I thought that is really, really cool. That would be optimization would be my word, but what measure as well.
Yeah, that's a great one. I went a little more abstract. I apologize. And I wrote down 24 is the year of resonance. And it's kind of an amalgamation of everything. Again, like it has to resonate in order to work. Like, again, B2B buyers are people, and they're people who want to interact with other people and do interact in so many different ways. And the data that you gather, you have to use it in ways that's going to resonate, because again, just first name on an email, it's not going to work. The way you leverage AI, the where you invest your money, like it all has to come down to what's going to resonate with the buyer at the right time, the right buyer, the right time, in the right channel. And if there's so much competition that it's so easy, everyone says it's cliche, you get lost in the noise. But that's one of the things where, like, if you want to stand out, there's not one right answer, but everything you has to do has to resonate, because otherwise there's probably 5 or 6 other competitors that they're going to go to who can do it, and who have found a way to get in with, whether it's one of their behavior traits or whatever else, what's important to them, they figured it out, and they're targeting them at the right time. So resonance was my word.
Awesome. Nice. Well, I wanted to thank you both for joining me. Just again, I appreciate the two of you sitting on this with me and answering some of the questions in chat. I hope we've had a few people in chat also participate in the conversation. Before we kick it over to Henry for some questions, if you do want the full report, we just went over a few of the key findings, but wanted to flash it on the screen here. If you're interested in downloading, there's a QR code, and we'll certainly be following up with it as well. But until then, Henry, was there anything else? Wanted to field it over to you if there's anything else you wanted to cover.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, thanks. This was a great presentation, a lot of really good data, great report. I encourage everybody to download the report. And we do have a lot of questions, and we're running low on time, so I want to make sure we jump right into those. The first question is for Sophia. How do we prioritize new strategies? Since changing a team workflow can be difficult, do you have any tips on integrating new channels or tools?
Yeah, great question. Typically, your strategy doesn't really change if you know what outcomes you're trying to achieve. However, I think change management is really key, right? In trying to socialize the new strategy or integrate a new tactics into your programs. So I would say communicate the why behind the strategy. What is it that you're looking to accomplish or achieve with the new strategy, or I think you mentioned workflows or channels that you're trying to implement. That would be really important for the team to understand why you're changing the strategy, why are we doing this, and ultimately the outcome for why we're doing what we're doing. It could just be a test, which is fine. I think as marketers and organizations, we need to be nimble enough in today's market to be able to test, and then it doesn't work, fail fast, and continue to the next tactic.
I think that's great advice. What are key KPIs for brand versus demand gen?
Yeah, so when we talk about the KPIs, I guess if you're looking at brand or demand as just broad subjects, right? You might look at brand, you might see things more like maybe a share of voice. If you're working with a PR agency, that might be a good one. I typically find engagement rate on a site is actually quite good, or time on site is another good one to sort of some highlight. What are you looking at the metrics that provide you the sort of my brand works? I typically find if you have a super high bounce rate, people come to your site and then absolutely leave. They're kind of coming to your site and saying, nah, that ain't it. And usually that's more from your site doesn't do a good job at conveying what you do well, or something akin to that. So those are some good brand ones. I think demand, the fairly obvious one is of course MQLs that might turn into opportunities won, and that percentage of how many MQLs you get versus opportunity one. I think some less immediately intuitive ones. Oh, and this goes back to brand. For brand, time to close, if you're a B2B brand, is actually a really interesting way of looking at your brand resonance from a metric perspective. And then finally from demand, I like to say that it's just kind of a conversion game. You really have, but reporting against maybe where those conversions are coming from, the more organic you get healthy conversions from, the better you are at kind of creating demand for the machine that is your brand. So your ability to say, okay, a bunch of people came in from organic search, and of that percent, we had 5% of those human beings who came in through search converted on a contact us form for new business. Be a really healthy indicator that your brand is actually generating demand on its own.
Yeah, and since you're talking about conversion, I think that's a good segue to another question. And maybe you want to pick this one up and maybe pass it to Kyle. But the question here is about measuring the impact of AI on conversion and tactics that used AI generated video. Do you have any insights on how to measure the use of AI on conversions?
That's a good question. I guess I have some thoughts on it. My first thought would be getting an understanding of just how much do you feel like you used AI to do the thing, first and foremost, right? So do you feel like you're setting up the right infrastructure in your marketing organization to say, this asset was AI, this one was not AI? And I feel like there's enough of an apples to apples comparison. What I find myself running up against most of the time when it comes to testing really anything is, do I felt like I isolated my variables well enough to say that my decision is justifiable of this worked better than that. So maybe the answer is kind of the same as usual. That is, if you feel like you've isolated the variable to AI did this thing specifically, and there was another version of it that was not AI, and that was sort of how I isolated, that's probably the best way of looking at it. Or if you have the time, right? If you have like more of a macro view of just year over year, or maybe, 6 months over 6 months period, and saying, we really started using AI in January, and from a macro perspective, the same seasons of business, we've kind of found that there's this disparity in percentage of conversion by like a significant margin. So significant that we think that it could have only been because of this major shift in our approach to the creative through AI. So that's not a specific answer, but I hope that it helps, at least helps you find the journey of tracking AI success.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Kyle, how about you take this one? Where do you think using ChatGPT is most useful?
At the beginning of the process. So ChatGPT is great for brainstorming. It's great for organizing your thoughts. It's great for no matter who you are, the blank page is an intimidating thing. And I think ChatGPT is good to be able to take notes and kind of organize and get kind of a thesis there. It's good for maybe offering up perspectives you weren't thinking of and help brainstorm and bringing more to the table. I would just say, yeah, the out of the whole kind of campaign process, the very beginning, the first probably 20%, it's great. I would not lean on it throughout the entirety of the process and make it be the workhorse. Because that's where you can run into troubles. But yes, absolutely. Like just when you're, whether you're trying to generate ideas or get another point of view or organize your thoughts, any of that sort of thing, it's a great tool to help just kind of get away from maybe the fear of the blank page and not knowing where to start, and really just getting somewhere. Because once you have something, you immediately know whether it's the right track or the wrong track, and then sometimes the right track appears before you. Like I often have to write the wrong thing in order for the right thing to kind of magically appear for itself. And so AI and ChatGPT can help with that. But I would say once you've found that track and you know you're the right track, you can thank it for its work, let it go, take a break, and then you pick it up from there.
I completely agree, Kyle. As a fellow content guy, like I feel like ChatGPT has completely eliminated the writer's block, or that blank staring at the wall. You just kind of type something into there and it just gets things going. Even if it's nothing you're going to use, it just kind of gets you right back on track and thinking. So 100%. Okay, we probably have time for one more question. So let's conclude with this one for you, Drew. Any recommendations on better journey tracking tools?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, Sophia or Kyle, let me know if you have thoughts too. I think I have more recently in my career adopted intent data into my workflow. So like 6 Sense, just to, I guess, name drop, but intent data for me has been really, really fun and interesting to wield as a demand gen marketer, specifically because it's like that early sign. A lot of the time we're looking at conversions, or we're looking at click-throughs, or we're even looking at impressions. Sort of feels like, okay, we put the thing out there and then it just kind of did the thing. So I like, for me personally, I really like integrating an intent data, especially like, again, I guess shout out to 6 Sense, but like 6 Sense, just because it allows you to say at the company level, here are the sort of like engaged buyers at the beginning, or here are people who have started snooping around based on the account level, is actually if you have an account-based team, it's a really good way of integrating that, like, okay, these accounts are snooping, like they are in the awareness phase, they clearly know who we are, or X% of our target account list went to our pricing page. So we think that that's like a healthy buying signal. So that to me is very, it's a very fun one to put it right up at the beginning, is to see where they're kind of coming from.
Awesome. Well, listen, everybody, thank you. Did Kyle, Sophia have any answers there?
Yeah, similar intent would be a good one to add. So you could connect the dots between brand to demand using intent. Whether it's 6 Sense or Intensify or demand based. I'm just name dropping here, Drew. Or Bombora. So those are some of the good ones, and some other intent data.
And we know you have great relationships with all your vendors, as you said before. So yeah.
24%, right? The 24%.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Drew, Sophia, and Kyle. This was a really great conversation, and thank you for answering all of the questions from our audience. We do appreciate it. Now, before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channels. You can register for live analyst and tech talk webinars on our events page at emarketer.com/events. Also, don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast. And finally, please subscribe to our newsletters. Thank you all again. Thank you for your time. Thanks to Drew and the team at Digitalzone and our eMarketer Studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.